Hello, this is Tony Hiller from RealClimateScience.com, the climate guy setting the record straight about climate. This video is about imaginary climate change in Australia. In 2007, Australia was suffering a severe drought, which was of course blamed by illiterate writers on global warming. In drought-riddled Australia, the effects of global warming are rippling through the economy, affecting everything from farming to mining. It may even swing the next national election. And they blame the Prime Minister. Howard is not willing to admit, however, that global warming is the cause of the drought. Most Australians blame the drought on human-caused climate change. The drought continued for several years, and by 2008, the BOM declared the drought to be permanent. Perhaps we should call it our new climate, said the Bureau of Meteorology's head of climate analysis, David Jones. Never mind that BOM's own data shows that Australia's gotten much wetter over time. Prior to 1970, these red bars show that Australia was in drought most of the time. But since 1970, Australia's been very wet, indicated by the blue bars. By 2011, Australia was so wet that much of the country was the wettest on record, indicated by the dark blue here. This data once again from the Bureau of Meteorology. Australia went in 3 years from officially permanent drought to officially wettest on record. In fact, it rained so much in Australia in 2010 and 2011, climate alarmists blamed them for a fall in sea level. They said that all the water from the ocean was piling up in Australia. Australia switching between drought and floods is nothing new. In fact, climate records going back to the earliest years show that that's been the normal climate for Australia since at least 1789. Drought followed by flood, followed by drought, followed by flood, followed by drought. This has been going on forever. You would think that experts in Australia would be familiar with this cyclical pattern, but apparently they aren't. In fact, experts have been misinterpreting cyclical changes in weather as being due to climate change since at least 1871. This is an article from the Brisbane Courier dated January 10, 1871, titled Imaginary Changes of Climate. A plentiful crop of speculation from weather prophets and projectors and half-instructed meteorologists, and all the philosophic tribe of Laputa in general, to whom the periodical press now affords such fatal facilities. Almost every season is sure to be extraordinary. Almost every month one of the driest or wettest or windiest, coldest or hottest ever known. Much observation which ought to correct a tendency to exaggerate seems in some minds to have rather a tendency to increase it. If this sounds familiar, it's because it's exactly the same thing as going on now. A press obsessed with climate change and climate experts exaggerating statistics. This obsession with imaginary climate change actually started much earlier than 1871. Here's an article from 1846 on the change of climate in Australia. That great changes have taken place in the climate of Australia, all testimonies satisfactorily prove. The Aborigines say that the climate has undergone this change since white men came into this country. People have been misinterpreting cyclical weather in Australia as being due to climate change for 200 years, and they've also been blaming white men for that long. A review of Australia's history shows that they've had some horrifically hot and dry weather in the past. Here's an article about Black Thursday. Probably one of the most terrible days of which there is any record in Australian annals was Thursday, the 6th of February, 1851, commonly known as Black Thursday. We find it recorded that as early as 7 or 8 in the morning, the thermometer at Melbourne stood at 117 degrees in the shade. The intense heat of Black Thursday was not its only peculiarity. From early morning it was accompanied by a hot wind, almost of the strength of a hurricane, and throughout the day the surface of the country was exposed to the full power of its withering influence. Bushfires raged across hundreds of miles of country, sweeping along with almost the rapidity of lightning and destroying nearly instantaneously men, women, and children. Another particularly bad period in Australia's history was the Federation drought from 1895 to 1903, when people were actually starving to death. In 1923 and 1924, Marble Bar, Australia set the world's record for consecutive days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. They had 160 consecutive days over 100 degrees. This graph is from the Bureau of Meteorology. Day-by-day maximum temperatures at Marble Bar over the period 31 October 1923 to April 7, 1924. At the peak of the heat wave, between late December and late February, many days approached or exceeded 45 degrees Celsius. That was the longest heat wave on record, but it wasn't the most intense. In January of 1896, the New York Times reported for location about 500 miles west of Sydney some unbelievably hot temperatures taken in proper shade at the station homestead. Look at some of these: 129, 126, 128, 129. Incredible temperatures when CO2 levels were at pre-industrial levels. The belief in climate change in Australia is being pushed by junk scientists, junk journalists, and junk politicians. It has no basis in science. They're confusing normal cyclical behavior with climate change. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.